afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Looks like we've got a few people just trickling in, but I'll begin by just introducing myself. My name is Lewis Green. I'm a data analyst for AROC, worked here for a few years, and I'm quite familiar with the data and the application processes in AOS. So my plan today is to just walk us through the upload process. So I just want to make it clear that the one we ran a webinar this morning that was for people to enter data into the database, and that's people that log in and enter the whole episode into our system. This webinar is focused on people who enter the data into their own patient management systems, extract a file, and then upload that file to us. So that's the process I'm going to be talking through, the uploading of the file to us and things that are surrounding that process. So if that's not for you and you're in the wrong webinar, we will be using footage from the earlier webinar to update our online materials, and we're planning on running more of these in the future. This is the first time we've sort of tried something like this, so it's a bit of a learning experience for us. So we've got a link on, you might have noticed it, where you click through to access this webinar. There's also a link there to a short survey. So we'd really appreciate anyone, all of you at the end, if you could just fill out anything good in that survey, things you liked, things you didn't like, things that could have been better, or whatever it is. We'd really appreciate that, because this is a bit of a learning process for us as well. So as I mentioned today, we'll be looking at just the upload process. I will begin by going through a few of the basic aspects of the data, i.e. the data collection forms and data dictionaries. And then we're also going to, if we have time at the end, just have a quick look at the data audits and data extracts from our system. That's not to be confused with the data extracts you get from your system, which you upload to us. I'll try and make that clear as I go along. But I'll start off by just taking us through to our website, which you're probably all familiar with. A lot of you might have even gone there today to get to the webinar. And as you can see, there's a survey available just, I can annotate that, just here. If you could fill that in afterwards, that would be fantastic. What I'd like to do though is show you this link. I think this is a very useful link here, because this takes us to our, that's not going to go away, is it?
There's a clear button.
There we go. Sorry, it's the first time I'd use that feature. So this page is our AOS documentation page. There's a lot of useful information here. I'll just highlight a few things. Most importantly, I think the data collection forms that are down here, you should all be familiar with these and aware that this is the place where we update them, and this is what I would call the truest form. So if we were to make a change to the data set, that would be where you would go to find the latest versions of the forms every time. Data dictionaries, very similar. And we also have the user manuals for the data upload. That's another useful one. And I will actually mention the data deadlines. So going into those, I'll show you now the deadlines, because this is very relevant for this time of year. As we're at the end of January, the deadline for calendar year 2018 data is almost upon us. So I do want to stress that we do need absolutely everything in by the 14th of February. Anything that's not submitted to us will not be included in the calendar year 2018 reports. So please familiarise yourself with this page and just get in the habit of being up to date with your data. Otherwise, you'll end up with too many errors, and your reports will end up suffering because of it. As I mentioned, the data collection forms. Today, I'll mostly be focusing on inpatient pathway 3 data. That's because it's our largest data set. Certainly most of you that are attending probably are familiar with this data set. But if you upload ambulatory, I'll be mentioning where that process differs. It's not very different. And I think that this will still be very useful to you, because the process is largely the same. But you can find here that the forms for each of those data sets are here. And the assumption that by the time you're uploading this file is that you're familiar with these forms, these data items have been entered into your system, and you've extracted it. And this link here, the data upload, as I said, this is where you'll find written user manuals that are sort of going to be covering the same information that I'm going to run us through today, but they're there for your reference anytime you'd like to access them. So to jump in, the data dictionaries I mentioned, I should just address these because there's a number of them. The ones that are mentioned for clinicians, Australia and New Zealand, these two are are very useful for understanding the definitions of the items, what they mean and how to enter them. These two for developers at the top, these are great if you're analysing the data files that you have and you want to know what data is in there. You can actually do that yourself, and the information is in these dictionaries. I don't expect all of you to understand how that works, but it's available to you if you want to. So let's go back to our online portal. This is where you'll be logging in and uploading your data files. Oh, sorry, the one thing I did mention, I know that you're all muted and we can't see you, but you can use the chat feature in this webinar. So if you have questions, I'll try and address them myself. It's just me monitoring the chat at the moment, so I might not be able to answer you straight away. But if you have questions or you want to ask something during the webinar, that option is available to you. So once you've logged in, at this point, I'll assume you've already got the data file from your system. If you're held up before you've even gotten a data file and you're unaware of how to get the data file out of your system, we're limited in how much we can help because it's obviously not our systems that we'll be dealing with, but we're certainly happy to, if we know someone we can put you in contact with, we'll happily do that. And there might be something we can help, but it may be you need to take that up with your IT or your patient management system supervisor. So at this point, we're assuming you have a data file in the format that you'd like to upload to AROC. The option here you'll be wanting to select is obviously data upload. Now, I see all the hospitals that I'm attached to. Most of you probably just see the one, but there may be a few of you that see multiple. If you see multiple, there is an option that will pop up here that means you can actually upload to all those hospitals with one file. Only use that option if you know what you're doing and you're sure that that file contains all of those hospitals' data items. Otherwise, you'll end up with some errors that might be difficult to understand. As most of you probably have just one hospital and most of your files have just one hospital's worth of data, usually you'll just be selecting a hospital you'd like to upload to. In this case, I'm selecting a blank hospital. So this is the page where you're obviously choosing the file. I'm going to upload 2 files today. The first one has some critical errors in it that I want you to be familiar with when you see them. You know what they mean. And the second one will have a few other different errors, but should have cleaner data, so to speak. So the first thing I'm going to do is find my broken file, choose that. Now, this is one of the areas where I mentioned inpatient data uploads and ambulatory data uploads may differ. Most of you that are uploading inpatient pathway 3 data, you'll be selecting this first option, which is the default. AROC V4 fixed width upload, in brackets inpatient. That's our most common data file, and it's probably what is familiar to most of you. However, if you're uploading ambulatory data, you have 2 options. There is the old format, which is the fixed width format, and there is the new version 4.1 tab delimited upload format. By now, we sort of hope that anyone who's uploading ambulatory is using this one. It's been out for a couple of years now, and we're really reporting on these new data items. So if you're not uploading in this format and you're uploading in this format, you might be missing out on some analysis. But for today, the data files I've prepared are inpatient. So I'm just going to leave the default and press upload. Fortunately, I've not prepared very huge files. Sometimes it can take a bit longer than that. Don't worry unless it really freezes up. Sometimes that happens if it's an enormous data file. We generally recommend uploading, my recommendation is once a month if you can, because I just find that the facilities that do upload once a month have the best time keeping on top of all of their errors. But if you're not uploading once a month, certainly once a quarter would be ideal, because if you're taking it beyond that, the data files you're uploading could be enormous, the errors you're going to get out are going to be huge, and becomes a much more difficult process. And you're more likely to forget things as well because you're doing it so infrequently. So this smaller data file went through. Now, I mentioned before that there was a critical error that I wanted to display to you guys. So if you ever see this red box and it says these lines could not be processed, these lines will be automatically discarded. That should be a big red flag to you. That's telling you that there is at least one episode in this file that AROC, our online system, cannot even accept as a rehab episode. We're not confident enough that it is a legitimate rehab episode, so we pop up this error and say that episode isn't going to be submitted to us. So what you can do is you can click this red button and it gives you a little summary table. in this data file I've prepared, there's only one episode that fits this criteria. And it tells you where to find that episode and what was wrong with it. So it's saying in line 7 of the data file, I was unable to create the episode for this line. An essential data item was invalid. So you don't have to necessarily understand everything that means, but I can quickly show you that the data file that was listed as broken, I'll just open up the data file. This is the data file. If you find the 7th row, you can actually see all the data in it. And in this case, because I prepared this earlier, I was very aware what the problem was. There's no impairment code on this episode. So that's a sign that there was something wrong and that episode wasn't going to be submitted to us. If you're overwhelmed by that process, that's fine. You can always email into us. I'm happy to review a data file for you and tell you what's wrong with it. But that option is available to you and the information is there. So I'll just get our screen back. So if this was me and I was uploading this file, I'd probably be inclined to at this point say, I don't really want to upload this file. I know at least that was wrong with it. There could be other things. And since I've prepared another file, I'm going to hit discard. That red button's always available during the process. And it's important you understand pressing that button means that everything you've done essentially is disappeared. We have no record of what you've uploaded to us. The data is not in our system and nothing got overwritten. So we're back to square one, which is fine and good in this case, because we don't want that broken episode to be causing any issues. So I'll hit select facility to go back. And this time, now the assumption is that I would have gone into my patient management system, found that episode and added impairment code and corrected the issue. So that's the assumption that I've done here. I now have this fixed data file that I've extracted from my patient management system. I select open. Now we're still uploading inpatient. I hit upload. And fortunately, again, it's a nice quick file. And we continue. So red box is gone. I'm very happy. That's great. It tells me how many patients and how many episodes are in this data file. It also tells me conflicts, patient conflicts, and episode conflicts. Now these aren't necessarily concerning. You shouldn't be worrying too much if you see these. A brief summary of how our system works is when the data file comes in, we look at every single episode in the file. And if we can be very confident that that episode already exists in our system, perhaps with a different FIM score or a different data item that's been updated, then it will just override it. If it's a completely new episode, then we have nothing there that says this is similar, it'll create a new record in your data. If there is mostly the same, but some of the crucial things have changed, like the patient's date of birth, perhaps an episode start date or an episode end date, then our system is in that grey area and says, well, do we override it or do we add a new one? So for those cases, we have this process, which is reviewing the conflicts. So you won't always see this, but when you do, it's not a huge problem. You just have to tell our system whether it is a new episode, whether it needs to be overwritten. In this case, I had two. There's my patient conflict at the top and my potential duplicate episode. And you can see that the difference here. So the first line we're talking about is what was in the file that we've just uploaded. In that file, there was a patient with this MRN and this date of birth and their gender. She was a female. Previously in our data, an episode with the exact same MRN, the exact same gender, but the date of birth that was out by 1 year existed. That would be a flag that probably needs to be updated. So in this case, I'm going to say that the one in the file was correct and the one in the data was incorrect. And I've clicked keep and discard appropriately on those two lines. I'll do the same concept for my patient and my episode conflict. And that is to say that the difference between these two is simply that the episode ended on the 6th in our data, but now it says the 7th in the new file. So that just means that previously this episode was uploaded to us. You said it ended on the 6th, you've made some changes and uploaded it. Now we think it ends on the 7th. And we need to confirm at this point which is correct. On the assumption that you've made the correct change in your patient management system, I'm going to say that we're keeping the one in the file and discarding the one in the AOS data that was previously submitted to us. Now I've done both of those, I just have to hit confirm and continue. Now it'll automatically take me to the next step. This is the data audit. This will appear every time you do an upload, and it is a very important part of the process. The first page you see is just a summary. You can see it's 1 to 20 of your errors. It's not absolutely everything that's wrong with it on this page, but it can give you a good sense of what's there. If you're uploading frequently and correcting errors a lot, it might be that this is enough to see all of your errors, but most of the time there's more than that. So we have these buttons on the right-hand side. There's 4 options available to you. I certainly recommend downloading at least one of them. If you like to use Excel, you can download the data audit in Excel, and it'll look a little bit something like this. I'll just have to change my screen. So here's my data audit. It's in Excel. I'll just even it out so you can see all the columns, and it has a summary of the hospital, what the error is, and some information to identify it. Obviously, there's a number of them here. One concept that I want to be clear on as well, we talk about red errors and blue errors, or cross-checks we often call them, or in this case we call it a warning. The red errors denote that something is actually wrong or missing with the data. A blue warning simply states that something has been entered inconsistent or in an unusual way. You don't have to correct every blue warning. They're just there to highlight to you that something is a bit inconsistent, and the correct way to handle a blue warning is to go into your system, confirm that everything is as it should be, that nothing's done incorrectly, and then if it's fine, you can just leave it. You can ignore those. They're just there to bring your attention to something that's a bit unusual. The red ones are more incorrect, and you should be looking into fixing those. Now, there's obviously a few here. If you don't want to view it in Excel, that's perfectly fine. The other options are also very useful, so I'll show you those. I'll just get my screen back. Here we are back at the screen. We never left. We've downloaded this one, but there are 3 other options. The audit summary is just going to give you what errors you have and how many. It's not going to be enough for you to probably fix everything unless you're already very familiar with what the errors might be. The most useful one, I think, that people probably use the most frequently is the very bottom one, download audit by patient. If you click this, it will download an HTML file. HTML files can be read in a web browser software, so I'm using Google Chrome. You can do it in that, or Internet Explorer, or Firefox, anything like that will open these files. If I open it up, it's similar to that last page, the summary, but this has everything in it, all the patients. And you can see that it's grouped. So if I was using this to fix errors, I would probably print this off, either save it as a digital soft copy or a hard copy if I was inclined, take it to my patient management system, and I'll go through one at a time and search for the patient identifiers in my system, find the thing that was wrong with it, correct it there. That is an important step. And you can also download it, as you saw on the previous screen, by the error as well. So if you have a lot of errors that are similar and across patients, you can download it grouped up by error instead of by patient. So it is important at this point that you understand that you would have to be downloading and saving a copy of this somewhere, because once we get away from this screen and we push the upload, it's more difficult to get back to this stage. So I definitely recommend at this point in time to be saving a copy of your errors and keeping it on hand. So now I'll hit return to upload. So basically we're finished. You'll note that these steps are all listed above here as well. We're on to step 3 at the moment, which is simply accepting or discarding. Now, as I mentioned before, that red discard will wipe it all and we'll be back to square one. You can do that if you want. It's not a problem if you press discard, as long as you're aware that you didn't provide anything to us yet. If you're going to press discard, it's very crucial that you go back into your system, extract that file on the assumption you've corrected these errors, and then upload again. The only time we actually receive the data is when this green button is pressed. And as I mentioned before, it would also be appropriate to press accept at this point. Even though there was errors in the data, that's okay. As long as I have that saved audit file on record, I go back to my patient management system, I fix up my errors and I upload again. The only difference between those 2 processes, the second one would mean that we had your data the whole time, even though it had some errors, and you may be more likely to get an episode conflict or 2, just if you change one of those crucial data items that are used to identify what has changed on the episode. In this case, I'd be happy to accept it. knowing that I was going back to my software, fixing it and re-uploading. So that's the process that we try and encourage you to do once a month. Upload your month's worth of data, get your errors, fix your errors, upload again. And then once you're happy that you've gotten rid of all your errors and you've pressed that green accept button on the very last time with no errors, that's perfect. You're completely done. Your data has been submitted to AROC and you're golden. You can wait until the next month before you have to worry about it again. I think that's a good overall summary of the upload process. If you have any questions in the chat, feel free to let me know. Because we're running well ahead of time, I'm going to spend a small window of time here talking about the data summary and data extract and data audit briefly, because I think they're relevant to the process of submitting data to AROC. But yes, if you have any issues with what I've covered in data upload, please feel free to type it into the chat. So I did mention the data summary. I think this is a really valuable tool, certainly at this time of year when you're wanting to upload and know that you've submitted that entire calendar year 2018 period. You can come here to data, select data summary, and what you'll see on this screen is all the hospitals that you're associated with and a summary of how many episodes you've submitted each month and the number of errors associated with it. So in my case, I'm only looking at Anywhere Hospital, which has no real data in it, so we're not going to see anything too useful here, except that, I mean, you can see in November there's an episode with 38 red errors. That probably just means that there's not a lot of information provided there. That would certainly have to be looked at. One thing to note on this page, the page only updates once per day at midnight. So if you upload a data file, even if you press that green accept button, you won't see the numbers reflected in this page until the following day. Still useful to stay on top of it though, because it's the most easily accessible resource to determine where you're up to with your data and where you're up to with your errors. A nice summary table there. Another feature I'd just like to address is the data audit. If you have uploaded a lot of data, or if you've uploaded a data file and you forgot to download that audit, if you'd pressed accept, that would mean, as we'd addressed before, the data is in our system. That means that straight away, you can come back into here and go to data audit, select your hospital, and then enter the parameters of the data file you've just uploaded, but you can do any period. Anything that's in our system that's been previously uploaded to us can have an audit extracted from it. So let's just assume we want to get one for all of 2018. What you see here is a grey box at the bottom. In this grey box has an outline of all the parameters that have been included. I could be more specific. I could only look at certain pathways. I could specify start dates as well as end dates. You can be quite specific if you'd like. In this case, I just want to be general, grab everything from the calendar year, tell me all my errors. Hit confirm, and now we're back at that same page we saw when we did the upload. The only difference this time is this is all the data in 2018 that's been accepted into AROC. Previously, it was just the episodes that were in that data file. So that is the difference between the two steps. If it's been accepted into AROC, you can download this at any time. Yes, so perfect. Okay, got you, Cheryl. Sorry about that. And you can return to the filter and change it at any time. So yeah, the difference between those two is that the file that comes in, the audit you get on your file is just what's in the file. In this section, the data audit section, you can choose anything. But just be aware that if you haven't pressed accept, if you'd uploaded a file and discarded, that this data audit feature won't pick up those episodes. It's only stuff that's been submitted to us. And the final feature that I'd like to bring up is the data extract feature. So data extract, it does get a bit confusing because I know we've talked about data extract already. That's extracting it from your patient management system. Now you can extract your data from our system, and again, it's only going to be episodes that have been accepted into our system. But once it's been accepted, you can pull it back out. And the benefit of doing that, on top of having your data in a file format that might be useful, so for example, it comes out in an Excel file in CSV, which Excel can read. but we also add a lot of derived items to the end of it. So if you're familiar with our reporting, we talk about expected length of stays, expected FIM changes, and SNAP classes. These aren't items that are provided to us when you submit your data, but we calculate them, and when you want to extract that data back, they'll be provided in these files. So I'll give an example of that just now. Data extract, it's a similar process as the data audit, but we do have a few more options. So I'll just do the same time period. And again, I could be more specific. I could choose to have just the stroke hemorrhagic episodes included, or perhaps I also want to have the arthritis episodes included. I can add as many as I want. And this grey box down here, I'll just draw a line around it. Everything in this box is what you're looking at and what will be included in the file you receive. This is what's interesting. So at the moment, I'm getting everything from the 1st 2018 to the 31st of December 2018. And these two impairment groups. Because I want to pick up everything, because I don't think there's actually a lot of data here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that and I'll clear these filters. And you can see now I'm basically getting everything from the year. Once I'm happy with that grey box, I hit confirm and it gives me a little summary. This tells you that there are 98 episodes submitted for Anywhere Hospital. 4 of those happened within that year. And then 4 of those met the following criteria, which in my case was basically everything. So I'm not surprised by seeing those numbers and not surprised that there's only 4 because this isn't real data. If I'm happy with that, I can download. Of course, if you're not, you can go back and change your filters and extract what you're after. Once you download the extract file, it'll come to you in a CSV format, which some of you might be familiar with. The benefit of a CSV file is it's very user-friendly. Excel will read it, so you can view it like you would an Excel spreadsheet. So here's my data file. I'll show you a useful trick that some people aren't aware of. If you highlight everything, find the little divide to change the cell width and double click it, you'll find that it changes the whole file for you, which is a really useful tip because these headings can vary in length, which means that now it's easy for me to read. But just a brief guide of how to interpret this. Each line represents an episode and each episode is identified, has all the information that was submitted to us. You can see everything, all the dates, all the numbers. We have FIM scores, discharge FIM scores, it goes all the way across. And then we start getting into derived items. So you have the patient's age, so you don't have to calculate that yourself, the month it ended, the year it ended, length of stays. There's a tremendous amount of value in these data files if you're comfortable looking into Excel and using this. So the purpose of this webinar was not so much to address data extract, I know, but I think it's something that can really be beneficial if you're interested in actually getting the most out of what AOS has to provide. Since I'm not seeing a lot of questions come through, I might just call it there. And if you have any further questions or any other issues, please don't be afraid to send us an email or fill out that feedback and we'll be in touch. So thank you very much, everyone.